They tell me that, if you're going to say something or you're inviting someone to campus who's going to say something, someone like Christina or Charles Murray or Ben Shapiro, who's going to say something that someone on campus disagrees with, it makes them feel uncomfortable. They're saying, well, if you make someone feel uncomfortable, you've compromised their safety because their emotional well-being, their psychological health is a component of their physical safety. So they're expanding the concept of safety to include having offended someone, and then that does give you license if you're saying that making someone feel uncomfortable is the same thing as undermining their physical safety. You are hurting free speech because you're saying, well, then to protect someone's emotions, we must censor free speech. And that's the kind of idea I see behind so much of this new on the left effort to stifle debate. It's clearly not a social change tactic. I don't think they think this helps spread their ideas. I think they are solely saying that we have a right not to hear things that we don't like anymore because of safety. It's certainly the case that you can have interesting discussions on some college campuses some of the time. This doesn't what happens to Christina and some other people doesn't happen every time, but it's happened enough to certainly be a problem. I mean, and these are some of the most elite educational institutions in America, in the world, places like Harvard and Yale, liberal arts colleges, Oberlin, Reid, etc., the next generation of leaders of our society. Not everyone who goes through college is experiencing this, but the people who are going to work at the New York Times and the Washington Post and run social media companies and make law and policy in the government, they were all educated under this new environment of incredible censoriousness or deference to hurt feelings, and that does worry me. I don't think it's crazy to be worried about that. Some of our critics say, like, oh, you're making mountains out of molehills. I'm like, well, this concerns me at least. This is a problem in student journalism now, is the activists, the progressive activists, think that the student journalists should be 100% on their side about everything. So if the coverage of something that happens on campus is objective, or even has a semblance of objectivity to it, I mean, they're still staffed by liberals most of the time, but the activists are saying that's wrong and you can't do that. So at Northwestern, the paper had covered, and by the way, Northwestern's School of Journalism is one of, if not the most prestigious one in the country. They covered a Jeff Sessions event where protesters yelled things at him as they are wont to do. That's fine. But then the activists objected to the news cover. It was just literally a news story about what happened. So then the newspaper actually apologized. An apology for covering the event. That's all they did. And they apologized for taking pictures of the event because, the activists would have to relive the trauma of the event.
They were re-traumatized.
Re-traumatized, right? We hear this language of mental health and treating it like just experiencing your daily sort of life is trauma itself. So the newspaper apologized and then was subjected to a lot of criticism from us and from other people. But like these are literally kids who will go on to work for important media properties. This is a trend. Harvard student newspaper, so they have resisted the activists, but the activists at Harvard have demanded that the student newspaper stop asking ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, for comment in articles about immigration issues. They said stop asking them for comment, but asking people for comment is like standard journalistic practice. You can't not do it. It is not a sign of endorsement of ICE or whoever you're commenting. If I was writing an article about why Richard Spencer is terrible, I would get comment from Richard Spencer. It's not an endorsement of white nationalism. But the activists have said Harvard, the newspaper must stop doing this. And the student government agreed with them. They endorsed the activists' crazy position.
Laura Kipnis, who's a leftist feminist, and she was at Northwestern, and professor, and she criticized and sort of made light in the Chronicle of Higher Education. She made light of trigger warnings and the whole sort of panic around sexuality on campus.
Yeah, I think dating between professors and students or something like that.
Yeah, she defends that, which well, she just defends freedom and leave people alone, and unless it's clear. And she's a very strong feminist. She's a liberal pro-sex feminist. So she's very strong on sanctions against genuine sexual harassment. But anyway, she was brought up on a Title IX investigation for an article that she wrote in the Chronicle of Higher Education. Then a dean came to her defense, and then he was investigated. And these are the stories that get in the newspaper. There are untold numbers of these absurd and frightening events going on in a daily basis.
When it comes to things like call-out culture, cancel culture, it seems like there are people who, sort of their career, goes up big time when they are, sort of involved in like, quote unquote, cancellations or something like that. There are more eyes on them. But then there are other people that we don't really hear about who have, quote unquote, been canceled, and they don't actually end up benefiting from that, sort of controversy. And I said before, I'm a comedian, so there's a good chance that, if somebody wanted to cancel Lou, and we could find a really cool way to do it. If you guys want to work with me, we can do like a whole flash mob sort of thing. We'll talk. There's a good chance because of the my field of comedy, or you guys both participate in the marketplace of ideas, where we could be okay, but other people who don't have that same security, it's sort of, what do they have?
This happens to teenagers. This happens to kids. If you experience just some success, there's some reporter waiting to look, well, what did you tweet 10 years ago? Did you say anything that doesn't look so good by the standards of 2019? The standards, by the way, that we just decided 5 seconds ago are the standards everyone must live under for their lives. Think of the Covington kids. Think of the desire, the crusade to destroy people that you didn't even know, just for maybe they did something wrong. I mean, it's being treated as like a revelation to learn that kids are not perfect, and teenagers have made mistakes and screwed up in some way. And now, before smartphones, before everything teenagers were saying all the time to each other was recorded forever, like when I was a kid, when you were a kid, we would just say stupid things that we probably shouldn't have said and then get away with it because there wasn't a record of it forever. Only now are kids being socialized and growing up at a time where their every waking thought is recorded for some horrible person to try to get their life ruined. And lives have genuinely been ruined over this. It's terrible, it's predatory, it's cruel. And many of us seem in a culture to want to engage in it, or want to engage in it at least about our enemies. Because this is something the right and the left have done to people who, so the left will do it, but then the right will do it to people on the left and say, well, we're just doing it because the left is doing it. And I'm like, well, maybe no one should do it. Wouldn't that be great? Let's just, because unless you're defending really the rights of someone you don't like or really disagree with, you're not defending the right. You're only defending your side when it happens to you, unless you have to defend people you don't like in order to defend the principle.
It seems like we're kind of in a time right now where there is no forgiveness, even for things that...
Or no path to forgiveness.
No path.
No way to atone. And people like Aziz Ansari, I felt, was wrongly accused, basically guilty of a bad date. And I don't know how great she was as a date. We never heard his side. And he's suddenly spoken of in the same sentences, Harvey Weinstein and Aziz Ansari, and as if Bill Cosby, as if that's one of these things is not like the other. And then he's supposed to sort of atone and now stipulate. I think that harmed the Me Too movement. I believe in that movement. We needed to bring the workplace up to 21st century standards. There were a lot of problems. But the answer is not wrongly accusing people and taking someone who just he did nothing that was worthy of the punishment. But people want him punished, and he's come back too soon. And the New York Times runs article, was he sufficiently, regretful of his misdeeds? This environment, and that's somebody, at a very high level who was nearly destroyed by wrongful accusation.
Yeah, I remember with that case in particular, and even the Louis C.K. Article that came out in the New York Times, when I was reading them, I felt very dirty. And with the Louis C.K. one, the reason why I felt dirty was almost like, here you are describing these interactions between Louis and these women, and I feel like it's like that's a very private thing between the two of them. And that even just me reading it, there was sort of this idea of, will you forgive him, Lou? You know, has he suffered enough, Lou? And I'm like, I should have no say whatsoever in what happened between these people.
Covington and some of these younger members of political kind of extremes have popped up. So Greta Thunberg and David Hogg and all of these young members of these kind of quote-unquote resistance / far-left movements have kind of come up against the right-wing equivalents. Are we seeing a movement towards the center? Are we seeing a kind of, oh, this is ridiculous, people are being too extreme? Is anything changing, or are we moving towards more extremism on both sides?
I have a child on the way. My wife is due. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was really fun making him. So he's due March 31st, and my hope is that he's really cute because I totally want to use him as a political prop. You know, I mean, if you have an ugly kid, it's really tough to sell your politics. Take it away, guys.
So what we have to remember is that the activist fringe on both sides, but the sort of crazy, radical activists represent a tiny, tiny minority. Even on campus, I don't think they're a majority anywhere. They're a small number of people, even at Reid College, at the most sort of intolerantly leftist place you can think of. It's a small number of the people. Probably most of the people there would have liked to hear an interesting person talk, but they're not going to say anything. They're afraid when a small number of people engage in the censorship and the canceling. So these people get our attention, and because they deserve our attention, they're doing some ridiculous and very destructive things, but they're not very numerous. So we outnumber them. We can take back the focus, the power, the attention, if people just stand up and say, no, don't do that, or I don't care that that person tweeted that a million years ago, or I may disagree with Ben Shapiro, but it'll be interesting to hear him speak, or actually I've been at events where that's how you stop the mob. The student if there's a group of students trying to cancel the speaker, and if someone, it's great when it's a student, sometimes it's actually a marginalized student, a student who's supposedly threatened by the rhetoric that they're about to hear, says, actually I would like to hear what this person has to say, and then the mob backs off a little bit. Sometimes it works. So we just need more people to like courageously and boldly say that, no, we don't care about this, stop doing that, please, and I actually think that can work.
And I think it can work because the arguments are on the side of freedom. If you look at the history of the evolution of the First Amendment, as it's gone through the decades and the centuries, wiser people than us, the wisest, judges and theorists have looked at both sides. They've considered, why not having laws against hate speech? We have had laws against them, but they don't survive scrutiny. They, as it was said, well said in the video, they create more harm, and they don't, by telling someone to be silent, then you have to empower a silencer, you have to empower a ministry of truth. We don't have that. We don't have blasphemy laws in the United States. And if you want to break down prejudice and you want to, stop the hatred, the solution is friendship, is getting to know people, living and seeing one another, and here, and what I worry about on the college campus now is they are making race so salient and almost fetishizing differences that kids who would just become friends, and once you become friends with somebody, a minute later, you forget about their category, the individual, and then you will begin to, this is what we saw this with the gay rights movement, that people just realized they knew, they knew gay people, and they couldn't dehumanize and they couldn't otherize. And we're on a path in the United States towards genuine, tolerance. I think we're probably, by most metrics I've seen in studies, one of the most tolerant countries in the world. However, if you look at we're very tolerant, like about race and about gender preference and all that, but if you look at political tolerance, we're becoming increasingly intolerant. People are more frightened that their child would marry from, if you're a Democrat, they would marry a Republican. Boy, that would have terrified my parents, who were like socialist/communist maybe. But anyway, people are more frightened that you marry if you're a Democrat, you marry a Republican, or a Republican the Democrats are more frightened, or a Republican, than they are if you marry someone of a different race. And so that's like a false, polarization.
Well, I think the political party follows the mother, right? If your mother is a Democrat.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Make sure to click the little bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to support us, check out our website, wetheinternet.tv.